This place again. Chino here. Yep. Hey, next time, can we meet somewhere nicer? You want to follow our video? I'm working on something. I've got tons of ideas for new videos. Well, for one, I was thinking about something with Flow and SharePoint groups. Well, why don't they just watch a video I've already done? Hey, hold on a sec. What is that? Hey, what is that? Where am I? What am I doing here? What the? I don't like what's happening here. You just stay back. So today I'm feeling strangely compelled to talk about Power Apps components. If you don't know what components are, they're effectively a way to simplify the app development process by creating reusable parts of your app. Now, if you've built a few Power Apps now, you know that nearly always when you're building an application, you'll be copying and pasting different parts of your app, or different sort of, I guess you could call them components, but different sets of controls of your application across multiple screens. And you may even have some features that are common across multiple applications inside of your organization or the set of apps that you're building. So components are a way to simplify that process by building that component as a separate piece and being able to reuse that anywhere within the app. Now, and the idea is if you make the change to the component, then it makes the change wherever that component appears, which is fantastic for things like headers, app headers, and navigation, and those kind of things. Now, components also take input and output, which is really great as well. So let's get started. Let's just create an app, and I'm just going to call this component demo. Right, I might just let's create 3 screens, and they're just blank. Now, the first thing I'll need to do is go in. Like I said, components are still in experimental. So let's switch them on there. And now we all have access to the components. And if we click on this little tab here, it'll take us to the components bit, and we can create a new one. Now, we can see on the properties on the side here, I've got width and height, and I can set some custom properties for that particular component. So let's just go up to width first, and we'll make that the app. Width. Because what I want to do here, I'm going to create the application toolbar at the top of my app, and I'm going to use that across all those 3 screens that I just created. So, and I think the width the height doesn't need to be any more than about 250 pixels. So that will be good. Now every top toolbar in an application needs some kind of logo, so let me just insert that in there. And for the image, I'll just select the Chino does stuff logo. Perfect. Now, I want to feature the screen title here. So this is going to be different across all my screens because each screen will have different functionality. So what I'll do here is insert a label. Just make that font bigger. And just click on my component again. I'm going to create a custom property for the display, and I'm just going to say screen title and the name. Call screen title again. Just put screen title for all those three properties. And it's going to be an input, and it's just going to be text. So just before I go any further, let me just rename the component to app header. Now this label's text is going to take reference the component name, dot, and I can see that property that's an input for that component as screen title. So let's just quickly see that in action. So we go back to screens. In screen 1, I want to insert the app header component. And for the screen title, I want to call that, let's just call it home. And in here, let's call my screen home. That 1, 2. Okay. Screen home. If we go to screen 1, let's insert the app header again, and we're going to set that to screen title to screen 1. So I'm just doing that through the custom property on the component. Screen 2, I'm going to insert that again. And I'm going to call that screen 2. So now we've reused that, we've created a screen header, a really simple one, and we've used that across 3 different screens. Now if we made a change to that screen header, so say that component, I should say, sorry, and if we insert, say, another label, and we say this is just v1.0 of our application. Just have that appear here. If we go back to our app, you can see v1.0 appears across everywhere we've used that component. So we've effectively, now if we want to make a change to the header, we only need to make it at the component level. We don't need to make it across our entire application everywhere we've used it. And you can see in this example, probably not so much of a big deal, but when you have lots of complex logic within inside of your form, if you're only having to make it in one place, that's going to simplify your development process tenfold. So the other thing that we probably would need in a header is maybe some navigation. So how about we insert next, that's the one I wanted. Let's call that btn next. And let's insert the back button. Now, just on visible on that, because we can't go back from the home, so on visible, if, let's say if header screen title is equal to home, then we don't want to show that. Otherwise, we do want to show it. So if we go back to our screen, we can see that button is not visible because we've set our screen title a home screen, so that button will not be there, which is fantastic. Now, if we go back to component, we want to add some custom properties. So we're going to call this nav next. We'll just set that the same, and that's going to be an input. And the type of data, we're not passing text this time, we're going to pass the screen. But you can see here there's lots of different types of data parameters or data types we can pass to our component, but in this example we want to pass the screen. And we need one more. Nav previous. And that's also going to be an input of type screen. So on select, we're going to navigate to our app header, nav next, and our previous button is going to be on select, navigate, app header, nav previous. So if we go back to our screen, our home screen, so in here, our nav next is going to be, we want to pass screen 1. In screen 1, select our component. Nav next is going to be screen 2. And nav previous is going to be screen home. Because we want screen 1, that button, to navigate to previous. Now screen 2, select the component. Our previous nav, we want to pass screen 1 because we want to go back to screen 1. And our screen next is not going to go anywhere. So we'll just have that go to active screen, but I possibly want to also hide that the nav right button when it reaches screen 2. All right, let's just do that quickly. So this button here, invisible. So if app header screen title equals, I think we called that screen 2, and we want to make that false, otherwise, oh, yep, false, otherwise we want to make it true. So yeah, so now we can't see our navigation. Okay, let's give that a go. Let's play that. We hit, we go to screen 1. Fantastic. If we click back, we go back to home. And then if we click that again, we go to screen 2. If we'd done this the old way without using components, we would have had to have copied this across our multiple screens and then edit the rules on each one of these individual buttons. Now, if say if the company logo had changed, or say if we had 20 or 30 screens in our Power App and some changes were needing to be made to a header, which will happen, and you will get asked at some point to make these kind of changes, you'll have to remember and go through each individual screen and make those changes. But with components, you've seen how quickly it is to make that change and have that effective across your entire application. Now, the other thing we can do with components is we can also output data from them. So let me just quickly give you a really simple example of that. This may not necessarily really be practical in real world, but it'll give you an idea where you perhaps could use components inside of your application to output some data. So if I create a new component, and let's just call this calculator. So in here, I'm going to take a couple of values. I'm just going to call this num1. It's going to be an input of type number. Let's create another one. num2. And it's an input of type number. And let's create a third one. And let's call it answer. And it's an output of type number. All I need to do now is drop a button onto this component and put calculate. And in this, all this calculate is going to do is set a variable. I'm just going to call that var calc. And in here though, I'm going to reference our input values. Now, like I said, this is an extremely simple example. Right, that's going to set, this is basically just going to add these two numbers that we're inputting into our component or into our calculator component, and it's going to set a variable. Now these variables are just exclusive to the component. You can't, inside a component, you may have noticed, you can't reference anything directly outside of the component. So they're effectively like their own like little application. So if you set a variable, its context stays within that component. It doesn't get there's no shared space between the component and the actual application. So the only way to reference and to get values back and forward from them is to use the input and output parameters. Right, so that button's just going to set this variable inside of the component to add those two numbers together. Now, the last thing I want to do is push that value back out to our answer property. If we go over here to the advanced property, we can see our answer output, and all we want to do here is select our var calc variable that we've set when we press the button inside of our calculator. So if we go back to our screen, let's just drop that component down on screen 1. Oh, wrong one, sorry. Components, we want to drop the calculator. Didn't really size this one up very well. Right, that's our calc button. Now if we select that component, we can see that we've got our two properties here. But what we want to do, we want to pass those properties in via a control in our application. Let's insert some text boxes. That'll be num1 and num2. And we want to have another label that will show us our answer. That is returned back from our component. In our calculator component here, num1, we'll do it through the properties here. Num1 will come from text input 1 text. We may actually need to wrap a value around that, so let's just do that now. And because we're dealing with numbers, and on our component here for num2, we want text input 2.txt. Now for our output, we want to show the calculator, our component, calculator's answer. Okay, so we've set up input. We've set up two text boxes. And for our component that we dropped on the page, we're setting num1 and num2, which are our input parameters, to be the two values that are coming from these text boxes. And then our answer label here will take the value from the component's answer, which is our output property, and display it. So let's try this. Let's run that. Let's put 12 and 12. If we calculate, we should have 24. If we type 1 and 1, we should get 2. And so on, and so on. The other thing we can do with components, if we're pretty happy with the way this functions, we can export them out. And what this does is it creates a file that you can save to your desktop. And you'll see above here that you've got the import component feature as well, which will allow you to reuse these components across all of your Power Apps applications, and therefore sort of creating little bits of functionality that you can reuse anywhere that you need to reuse them. Hi guys, that's another video. If you liked it, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe if you want to keep up to date with all the latest content. And of course, remember to also hit the bell button if you want to be absolutely sure to be notified when anything new comes out. I thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.